And you can hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you, and it looks like we're now recording.
All
It's
right.
always a guessing game with this thing. So, good morning, BIOS fans and friends. I am here with the Reverend Dr. Monty Wright. We're going to say doctor. We were just having a conversation about this. We're going to say doctor because he's done with everything, just waiting for his defense.
That's right.
And Dr. Wright is the senior pastor of Snoqualmie Valley Alliance, lead pastor of Snoqualmie Valley Alliance, and he's transitioning to be the district superintendent for the CNMA Northwest. And so what
Yeah.
we wanted to do today was talk a little bit about his transition and call. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Wes. I have really enjoyed watching your interviews. So I'm glad to be here having this conversation with you today.
It has been a blast just being able to talk to people about some of this stuff and like learn more about kind of the valley and its ministry, but then also the what's actually happening on the ground versus what you read about or you see on some of the media outlets. So why don't you, for those who might be watching who don't know you or your background or SVA or anything about the Valley, why don't you give us just a short introduction to you?
This one, the flyby. Yeah. So, so I've been ministry all of my adult life. I started planning churches when I was 20, right out of the Lutheran Bible Institute of Seattle, which no longer exists. But I transferred to LBI from Central after I met Jesus, and I have been in a church plant literally since I was 20. Currently, Snoqualmie Valley Alliance, this was my third church plant, and we just turned 20. And so it's been a great ride. Two churches that I planted were with the Christian and Missionary Alliance. One was a non-denominational, but my first church was actually a Lutheran church. So I've kind of worked the spectrum of churches. So starting apostolically, starting new work's been probably the heartbeat of my ministry over the years.
Yeah. So as you think about starting churches, as you think about your call, getting into it, and you think about your next call as district superintendent, what are some of the things about call that you've learned about over the years?
About call, I think it's a big word. It's a big subject, and I think it's a subject that's been abused, even theologically over the years. So I'll give you my first base. First, I believe in calling, because a lot of people feel stuck. You've maybe heard folks, "Hey, I'm called to preach."
Yep.
And like, that's awesome. Maybe you should actually try preaching first. Or maybe you should be good at what you think you're called, or be equipped for that. But so we can have this super spiritualized call. We've also elevated calls. Missionaries and pastors higher call than lay Christians. That's a distortion of the call too. So I would say that what I love about the call, it really is the intrinsic question about who am I, why am I here, what am I supposed to do with the gift of life that God's given me. So purpose is embedded in it. But I believe in calling, you're called to a person first. For me, that's been really clarifying. I'm called to Jesus first before I have a hint of being called to something specific or tangible, like a pastor or this particular church or the DS role. So I'm called to Jesus first, and then when I surrender to him, it's kind of up to him to lead me in whatever direction that might be.
How do you? Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like the vocation precedes call.
Yeah, because I think when you start to seek your calling, what am I called to do? I think at the end of that journey, you find that someone was actually seeking you.
Yeah.
And so calling is less something found, more something discovered.
Yeah.
Because God has been searching for you the whole time. So it's kind of a roundabout journey.
Well, and it's relational.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So how do you know when it's time to enter into a discernment process?
So when is it time to potentially do something new? Well, it's when the thing that you're currently doing falls apart, Wes. No.
But see, here's the problem with that is sometimes you cause it to fall apart.
Yeah.
Sometimes God kicks. I mean, you had a sermon series this summer, emotionally healthy spirituality, and uses the metaphor of the ladder. And you said sometimes people have to crawl up the ladder, and they're really trying to crawl, and God just pulls them down. I was thinking, no, God sometimes just comes under and just kicks the damn thing out from under.
That's right.
You know, and then sometimes you can be in tune.
Yeah.
The rhythms.
Yeah.
And then it's, I mean, but those are three very different ways of approaching it.
Absolutely. Well, and I do think I'm speaking broad brush here, but a lot of pastors, I'll stay in that vocation for a moment. A lot of pastors, I think, do leave because things aren't going well, and they get a word from the Lord or a call to a new thing when it was really, they were just struggling with where they were at, versus a true sense of God was calling you. I mean, there's been times at SVA, so 20 years at SVA, and it's been the best 20 years of my life. Yep. Every year, I've lifted SVA up to say, God, am I the right leader to take SVA to the next level? Do you need someone different? So even with my 20 years, I have held SVA very loosely. Yeah. And so for me, I would say the last 2 years, maybe I just felt some stirrings, and I didn't know what the stirrings meant. Yep. And so I just try to pay attention to, what my body's telling me, what's the Holy Spirit nudge. And then I just keep making the next right step and seeing what happens. So 2 years ago, I didn't hear, oh yeah, you're going to be the district superintendent over Alaska, Washington, Oregon, a little chunk of Idaho. But I did definitely feel there was some stirrings that there could be a shift coming for you. But Wes, you know me, that could have been launching something new at SVA. That's kind of how I've been, is like, well, we've launched a Bible college. We've launched a free clinic. We've launched a coffee company. We launched a coffee house. There's so many fun entrepreneurial things we've done. So for me, there was zero assumption that I would be shifting out of SVA, because I'm pretty happy there. But when I felt the nudge to let my name stand for this role, here's kind of some of the criteria I put it through. Is there's a lot of things I can say yes to. So does it really fit my core purpose in life? Does this role, is it in my wheelhouse? Is this something that I naturally live into? And this particular role kind of fit how I'm wired, what I believe my call, my purpose is to be, which is beyond pastoring. And it definitely was a skill set that I believe that I had. So that was a piece of it. Did it fit that, or was it radically different? Since it fit, then I leaned into it, let my name stand, and then Amy and I just prayed a ton for God's will, to be done. Yeah.
I mean, how do you enter into that place of courage? Because I think of, like, when you open yourself up to a discernment process, the possibility of a new call, going into a situation where you don't know the outcome. How do you have the courage to do that? What does that look like? How do you prepare yourself for that?
Yeah. So that's a hard question. That's a hard question. I walked into this first. My best confirmation source is my wife, Amy. The other doctor, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we have everything marked off.
Yeah, that's when we come home. We just say, "Hello, doctor. Hello, doctor."
Nice.
Amy's a great discerner, and since we have a covenant of oneness, anything I do affects her.
Yeah.
And so, stepping into this with her, that was probably the first part. I don't know about you. If I know Amy is behind me, I am unstoppable.
Yeah.
Even planting Snoqualmie Valley Alliance, over 20 years ago, we had planted 2 churches. the Issaquah church, I had just finally got staffed and paid full time. And with 6 months after getting a full-time check at that church, I felt the call to plant another one. And Amy was like, no way. Yeah. You're down to one job from 3, you know? And so we entered into some time of praying, and about 6 months then the Lord really spoke with Amy to confirm things. And when I had that, then I felt I was honoring her. And not just saying, hey, no, I'm called, but this is an us thing. So Amy really is a primary confirmation for me. So when this time came around, because this isn't the first time I've been asked, we've prayed every time. This time we both felt, I think this is maybe what God's been preparing us for. Yeah. But dude, it is still terrifying on the other end of this. Because, you know, I don't know where we're landing yet. Amy doesn't have a job past June. And so I was like, all right, finances, everything. Yeah. So I just trust that God's got us, always have. Even with the church plants, God has just really taken care of Amy and I every step of the way. Sometimes been lean, sometimes have been abundance, right? But God has never let us down. So I would say it's probably the source of the courage is, you know, God, you have been with me every time I've sensed a nudge from you, and I don't see any difference in this one.
What would you want to say to some of the bio students who are sitting on the fence of, do I want to go into licensing and ordination, or do I want to go into lay ministry? How do I really enter and move through that process? What would you say to them?
Well, that's getting to that's getting deep into the discerning of your call, right? Yeah. Wes, I talked with you a little bit about Os Guinness' book called The Call. Yep. Which I love that book because he talks about the Protestant distortion and the Catholic distortion of the call. But what I appreciated about that book was really getting it into the relationship of, deciding, who am I? How has God gifted me, wired me? Then I think knowing that, I feel that's probably where you're going to lean into. Do I go professional vocational ministry, or do I go lay ministry? Both are needed. Yeah. Both are valuable. Both are needed. I scripted out my purpose statement.
Oh, nice.
Right before we got on, and I wrote this a long time ago, probably I'm going to say 25 years, and it stayed true. The thing about a purpose statement is it's true of you and your call, regardless of job. Does that make sense?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Totally.
So, I help people every year in Timothy Institute work on their purpose statement. And it's not about crafting this business mission statement. You do take the data of your gifts, talents, ability, are you apostolic? Are you shepherd, teacher? You take all that information and it goes into this cauldron, that helps you process it. But your purpose is bigger than you, and it's bigger than a job. Yeah. So that's why I would say to bio students, it's like, calling is larger than, do you want to be a youth pastor? Do you want to be a preacher, missionary? It's about the core of who you are. My purpose statement, which I use as my compass, is that I am called to be a theological leader that poemetically equips men and women to live and lean into the why of their existence. Mm. So I can do that when I was checking groceries at QFC. Yep. I could do that when I sold houses for Coldwell Banker, and all the years that church plants didn't pay me, right? Yep. And I also can do that as a faculty member at BIOS. Yep. I can do that as lead pastor of Snoqualmie Valley Alliance, and I will still be doing that same thing as district superintendent of the Alliance Northwest. So to the students, I would say that drilling into that level of understanding your purpose, not just your wiring, not just your gifts, but who you are, that will lead you in a direction that for a season might be vocational ministry,
Yeah.
for a season may not be.
Yeah.
So, but if you have that, like the early desire I had is like, I just couldn't not teach, lead worship and all those things. I couldn't see my life apart from that. That was a pretty big indicator for me that there would be a vocational part, even though it took years of me working other jobs so I could plant those churches. So lean into the passion of your existence, and I think that will create the road. I think you'll know then.
I like that. Lean into the passion of your existence.
And BIOS is just, I mean, that's why we launched BIOS. So not only do we equip the next generation leaders, but for our students to really get that sense, that grasp. And we focus on that from the 1-year certificate Timothy program all the way through, a 4-year bachelor's degree. So that's one of the things that's unique about BIOS, that separates us from so many other schools is let's get there, because then it's not about the job. It's about you and God and you being faithful to steward the gift of yourself. Yeah.
I love that. It seems to take a bit of pressure off of the position.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of leadership in terms of you have positional leadership and you have leadership through influence. And that really makes you consider, so what are my influential levers that God has given me?
Yeah.
And no matter where I'm at, how do I live them out? Which is a much more, I think, biblically faithful understanding of the priesthood of all believers. That often gets thrown around to say, well, lay people should be able to be pastors. Well, no, but it also doesn't say pastors are better or elevated above lay people.
Yeah. Do you have the gift of shepherd?
Yeah.
Do you have the gift of, do you have these primary gifts? And you can lean in that direction.
Yeah. Who was Alan Hirsch just wrote a couple of years ago now, the Apist book. Based on Ephesians 4. I remember when that came out. I wish it would have gotten more traction up here.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to have taken off, but what Hirsch and Frost have done have just been equipping people in Australia and trying to bring it here to the States.
Yeah. So there's 2 other names to throw in with Hirsch and Michael Frost. One is Mike Breen. He's the head of 3DM.
Yep.
And our district has actually contracted to create training huddles with Breen.
Oh, nice.
Organization. The other guy that I really love, that I feel for me, his words just really spoke to my heart, is Hugh Halter. Primarily his book Tangible Kingdom. He's a PLU grad, and but super. Boy, he's done it all. He's the big church, the Bivo church, the missional church. He's a great voice on this too.
Yeah.
And so he's got a call, but how does that play out?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so
I think some of that too dances into, the question of God's will, I know you probably weren't even wanting to go there, but.
Oh, we can. I love this.
As a pastor, the questions I get is, Monty, can we sit down and discuss? I've got option A, option B, job A, job B. I don't know what to do. What do you think God's will is? And I'm probably not their funnest encounter, but I'm like, well, what do you want to do? And so I think we think so binary. And when you bring that binary or dualistic thinking into the call, it's the same thing. Yeah. Should I be a pastor? Or should I be this? It's like, the answer is yes.
Yes.
And so when people will come in with A or B options, I just go, that just doesn't excite me a whole lot. So my questions to you is, one, what is your heart, your gut telling you?
Yep.
2, God loves you regardless of A or B. I doubt that he has said A or B. He has this allowed will that he works within versus everything is decreed, right? And so many people, when we think dualistically and everything's decreed, you're kind of more into a Calvinistic infralapsarian or supralapsarianism view of God, which I just agree with, that God has far more allowed will, and then how he works with us within the allowed will, he will make sure we get where we need to be.
Yeah.
But so the answer between A and B is, I think, generally yes. And I'll say this: what do you think will draw you closer to God?
Yeah.
A or B?
Yeah.
A might have more income.
Yeah.
E might have less, or maybe the job with more income will draw you closer to God. For me, that's always been my number one question. Well, if I step into this role, do I feel this will hinder my relationship with God, or will it help build it? And so that's where I think calling and will of God also intertwine too. Is it God's will for me to be a pastor, or maybe?
Well, I mean, it's one of the interesting things I found in seminary was, and I primarily found this happening with folks who had a history of pastors in their family, but they'd go to seminary thinking like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And it didn't actually draw them closer to God. If anything, it pushed them away from God.
Yeah.
And you would think that being a pastor, you're constantly propelled towards God. But sometimes if you're not trying to sync up with God's rhythm, you can find yourself, even if you're in the most holy of holy places, very far away.
Well, so that reminds me of the Kierkegaard quote for you today, which is about that, like the family legacy thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Kierkegaard wrote that personal purpose is not a matter of philosophy or theory. It's not purely objective, and it is not inherited like a legacy.
Oh, man. Well, see, that's so funny. I mean, I shouldn't say funny, ironic. I mean, Kierkegaard has a depressing life. gets kicked out of the state church, the Dutch state church, but is buried there at the very end of his life, and like everything in between, father of existentialism. But I love that.
Yeah, I do too. It's like, do I do it? Well, how long ago it was really families' work ethics or work choice was based off legacy.
Yeah.
I mean, you think of like the names like Cooper, Smith. Those names were attached because that's what the men in the family did. You were like, my last name is Wright, so it was like a wheelwright. Well, they worked on wheels. And so blacksmiths became smiths. And so it's interesting, this would be a fun research topic. When did we begin to see legacy shift where you were expected to be a pastor? If your dad and your grandpa, you were expected, even if you weren't called, you were expected. And if we had learned this lesson like 500 years ago, we might have been okay.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Wow. Well, thank you for your time.
You got it.
And for jumping in on this. I know you're busy in the midst of your own transition as you go through things. Do you have any last thoughts you want to leave for people?
Yeah, no, I'm just excited for, what the future has for us at BIOS. And as we are adapting to and continually asking the question, what is the best way to equip men and women for ministry? And so I'm excited for the team that we have. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited to see what the next 2 to 3 years are going to look like for BIOS. And any potential student listening in, it's like, I would highly consider, if I were you, jumping into the BIOS family. It's very unique, and God is doing great work in the lives of the people and the students who are with us.
Yeah. Thank you.
You got it.